The Starlight barking. Chapter 4. By now the 50 Dalmatians who were coming to London were accomplished swooshers. Pongo lined them up on the front lawn in rows of 4. He and Mrs. were in the front row with Patch, and Roly-Poly. Lucky and his wife, Gay, were in the back row to see there were no stragglers. In between, dotted about, were the other members of Pongo's family. They were looking forward to seeing their famous sister, Cadpig, in Downing Street. When they were ready to start, Pongo said to Mrs. "It does seem strange to set out without so much as a drink of water. Shall I ask if any dog is thirsty?" "Ask it you like, but no dog will be any more than we are." "Still," Pongo asked, "but though the pond was at hand, which the dogs found more tasty than tap water, no dog wanted to drink." "Very peculiar," said Pongo. "Just metaphysical," said Mrs. Pongo had a few last words with Prince. Mrs. kissed Purdidu affectionately, and all the dogs, who were staying behind, wished the little army good luck. Then Pongo said, "Now we'll start very slowly. Then take your pace from Mrs. and me, and be ready to stop at the farm. I must have a word with the general." "Gates, please." The tall gates swung open, and out at a slow swoosh went the 13 rows of 4 Dalmatians. Then the gates swung together again. When they were out on the road, Pongo increased the pace, and they reached the farm quickly, to find that a beagle, 2 spaniels, a very brave Pekingese, and 4 dogs of mixed breed were lined up and ready to join up. The sheepdog said, "I swooshed to the village and recruited them, and I've got myself a bright lad to train as a lieutenant." He glared down at a small Jack Russell Terrier. "Not that he'll ever be as good as Mrs. Willow, or as lucky was at his age." "Yes, I will, I'll be better," said the Jack Russell Terrier, in a shrill voice, glaring back at the sheepdog. "Bless my soul, what impertinence," said the general. "Still, I like a bit of spirit." One reason that the general was so fond of the tabby cat was that she always answered him back, and there was no doubt that the Jack Russell was going to be just as good at it. Lucky had now got the 8 dogs from the village into line. "My guess is that you'll be joined by volunteers all along the route," said the general, "which is bound to delay you, so you'd better get a move on." "All dogs at the ready," said Pongo, and then, after saying goodbye to the general and the Jack Russell, he commanded, "Quick swoosh." The road from the farm twisted, so the swoosh wasn't really quick at first, but after they were through the village, where all the dogs who were remaining on guard raised a hearty cheer, they were soon on the high road, and could go full speed. Pongo found there was no need to bark instructions. Whatever pace he set was instantly followed. He found this puzzling and asked Mrs. if she could explain it. Mrs. at once said, "It's quite simple. You think a faster thought and we all go faster. You think a slower thought and we all slow down. Indeed, we only move forward at all because you think a forward thought." Just then there was a terrific commotion. Roly-Poly swooshed backwards and bumped into the dog behind him, and that dog bumped into the dog that was behind him, and so on right to the back row of the army. Pongo both thought and barked halt, and was thankful no one was hurt. "But whatever happened, Roly?" he asked, while the dogs behind were picking themselves up. "I was listening to what you and mother were saying," said Roly-Poly, "and I accidentally thought a backward thought." "No one but your father is to think any thoughts at all," said Mrs. "And you'd better warn all the other dogs, Pongo." But Pongo didn't think this would be wise. It might make them nervous, and no dog but Roly-Poly would think a backward thought when we are swooshing forward. "All will be well if Roly will make his mind a blank." I'll try hard," said Roly-Poly. The swoosh began again, but this time Roly didn't budge, and was knocked down by the dog behind him. Again the army had to halt. Mrs. said, "He made his mind too blank. It didn't let your thoughts in, Pongo." "Roly dear, tell your mind that it's to do what your father's mind tells it, just until we get to London. Then you can think your own thoughts again." After that, they swooshed smoothly until they reached the town of Sudbury. Pongo, looking at the closed shops, thought of all the pleasant shopkeepers, now fast asleep. He knew many of them well, as the Dearleys often brought him, and Mrs. here on market days. How jolly and noisy the market had always been. Now it was deserted except for a group of dogs standing by Gainsborough's statue, waiting to join the army. Pongo halted so that Lucky could fit them in. Mrs., looking up at the church clock, said, 12 o'clock. "My favorite time. Both hands are in the same place, so I can't get them mixed." Then, as the clock began to chime, she added, "Whoa, Pongo, do you remember? It was striking 12 the first time we saw this town, when we came to rescue the puppies, but then it was striking midnight, which makes quite a different noise." "Not really," said Pongo. "Well, it does to me, because the feel of midnight is just a little scaring, and the feel of midday isn't, though today even midday feels a bit peculiar." Soon they were on their way again, and swooshing through beautiful open country. It was a marvelous high summer day. In fact, Mrs. thought it was the highest summer day she had ever known. The sky seemed farther away than usual, and looked more like blue velvet than a normal sky does. Mrs. felt she would like to stroke it. Tall trees looked particularly tall, and their heavy foliage looked particularly soft and furry. Cornfields were turning gold, and the very air seemed golden, and not just because the sun was shining. The air seemed to have a golden haze of its own, and the whole countryside was utterly still. Mrs. said, "Isn't it strange that, though we're moving so fast, our ears aren't blowing back, and I can't feel any breeze on my nose," said Pongo. "All the winds, like all the creatures but dogs, must be asleep." "Pongo, I am enjoying this peaceful swoosh." Pongo felt it wasn't safe to feel peaceful, but he didn't want to worry Mrs., so he told her to go on enjoying herself. "You mean, as long as I can," said Mrs., guessing that his sense of responsibility was making him anxious. "And so I will, but I could enjoy myself much more if you were enjoying yourself. Do try. Remember that enjoyment's something you can store up. Once you've had it, no one can take it away." "That's a fine maxim, my dear." "A what, Pongo?" "A maxim. It's a word I've heard Mr. Dearly use. I think it means something you specially believe in." "Fancy me speaking a maxim," said Mrs. proudly. "Anyway, try to relax. Perhaps there may be worries ahead of us, but don't let's meet them halfway." So Pongo relaxed, and the whole army of hover dogs swooshed peacefully through the still, silent morning, stopping only when dogs were waiting to join the army. But the worries that lay ahead were soon reaching out toward them. While they were waiting for Lucky to fit some dogs in, Pongo felt a sudden stirring in his mind and, a moment later, he heard Cadpig barking. The thought wave had come just ahead of the bark, like light traveling faster than sound. He answered at once. "Thank goodness I've found you," said Cadpig. "It isn't easy to get in touch with dogs who are on the move. Where are you and how soon will you be at number 10? Pongo said he thought they were about halfway, and would be at least another hour. "You're being terribly slow," said Cadpig. Pongo explained that they sometimes had to stop for dogs who wanted to come with them. Cadpig brushed this aside. "Let them come on their own." "But they don't know the way," said Pongo. "I do because I've often driven to London with Mr. Dearly." "They can get to London if they think about getting to London," said Cadpig. "I've had that information barked all over England, but some dogs just want to be led. Anyway, far too many dogs are coming. There's a seething mass of dogs outside number 10. "Oh father, do hurry." "Anything specially wrong, dear?" asked Mrs. "Nothing I can bark about, but I do have a lot on my mind. I must go. I'm being called. I think we may be getting through to America. Now swoosh your fastest, but look out for traffic when you get near London." "Traffic?" said Pongo, astonished. "I mean dog traffic, of course. There are dog jams all over the place. Get as close to Downing Street as you can, and then bark to me. I'll send an escort. Goodbye for now." All the dogs had heard Cadpig, so Pongo only had to give the order full swoosh ahead, and set the fastest pace he could. Mrs. didn't care for it at all. She said, "All the peace is gone." "Well, Cadpig never was a peaceful dog, Pongo. Did you think she sounded scared?" Pongo had indeed thought so, but he didn't want to worry Mrs., so he just said, perhaps it was simply that her voice was a little tired. She must have done a powerful lot of barking this morning. "Well, we shall soon be there to help her." There were now fewer waiting dogs who had to be stopped for, as many of them had started on their own. When after a long, fast swoosh, the outskirts of London were reached, traffic problems began and it was no longer possible to swoosh fast. Dogs were coming from all directions, in small groups, and long processions. It was difficult to judge who had the right of way. Pongo wished the traffic lights were working, and suddenly they were. He didn't feel he was a sufficiently powerful wisher to have done this on his own, so he could only think that Cadpig had somehow arranged it. As they got closer and closer to the heart of London, the streets looked stranger and stranger. There were no humans anywhere. There was no traffic, but dogs. All the shops were closed, but wherever there were houses, some front doors were open, and dogs were sitting there watching the passing dogs. Nowhere was there any sign of panic. Indeed, the watching dogs looked particularly calm, expectantly calm. Mrs., while they were waiting at traffic lights, said, "Doesn't it strike you as peculiar that there's so little noise? It isn't normal for dogs to be so silent." "I think they're listening," said Pongo, "and perhaps they're learning to hear with a sort of inner ear." "Well, I don't think it's healthy," said Mrs. "Sometimes the young dogs at Hell Hall make more noise than I care for, but I'd be glad enough to hear it now, and I don't think I hold with inner ears, or thought waves. How can one be sure one's keeping one's thought to oneself? One's entitled to private thoughts." Pongo was about to say something soothing, when he saw a look of horror come into his wife's eyes. He said quickly, "What is it? What's wrong?" Then he saw what she was looking at. Partly hidden by some small houses was a factory with a signboard on the top of it on which was painted, in scarlet, "Cruella de Vil and Company, makers of clothes that clank." "Clothes that clank?" To Pongo it didn't make sense, but it did to Mrs. because she was a bad speller. She said at once it means clothes that clank, but all that matters is that she's back in England. That wicked woman. Pongo now confessed that he had known. But she's not our enemy now, Mrs. She won't want Dalmatian skins anymore. Mr. Deville's no longer a furrier. The Dearlys said he and Cruella are making plastic raincoats. Plastic raincoats don't clank, said Mrs. And clanking clothes sound dangerous. Up till now I've quite enjoyed this adventure, but if Cruella's back, she can't have anything to do with what's happening today, said Pongo. Just try to keep your mind off her. See, the traffic lights are changing. Mrs. was only too glad to move past the factory. But she went on worrying, and after a few minutes she said, "We must warn Cadpig. She must have Cruella locked up." "But Cruella will just be asleep, like all humans," said Pongo. "You forget, Cruella's not human." "We were never sure of that," said Pongo. But it was true that they had once believed that Cruella might be some kind of devil. Perhaps the mysterious sleeping wouldn't affect devils. Still, he told Mrs. firmly anyway, only dogs are awake, and she's certainly not a dog. Before long they were in Camden Town, not far from Regent's Park where Pongo and Mrs. had once lived. Then they hurried across Marylebone Road, and along Langham Place past Broadcasting House. Mrs. said, "There won't be any broadcasting as there are no humans awake. How Cadpig will miss television." Regent Street was very full, and not only of swooshing dogs, there were also a great many dogs merely looking in the shop windows, and now there was more noise. Dogs were chattering quite gaily. Mrs. heard one say, "Madam Cadpig's quite right. If we've come to London we might as well enjoy ourselves." No doubt Cadpig was trying to keep everyone happy. Piccadilly was even fuller than Regent Street. But Pongo's army managed to get through, and then went along Haymarket into Trafalgar Square. "Nearly there now," said Pongo as they swooshed into Whitehall. Then he wondered if he had spoken too soon, for the crowd was almost solid, and at the entrance to Downing Street it appeared to be quite solid. What was he to do? Cadpig had told him to let her know when they arrived, but there was so much noise that no bark would be heard. "Well, we must do our very best," thought Waves, he said to Mrs. And then he asked all the dogs in the army to help. "Just think, with all your strength, Cadpig, we're here in Whitehall." It worked magnificently. Within a couple of minutes a squad of police dogs were forcing their way through to Pongo. The leader said loudly, "All dogs of Madame Cadpig's own breed are to proceed to Downing Street. All other dogs are to proceed to Horse Guards Parade." Pongo felt responsible for the dogs who had joined him. He said, "Will they be well looked after on Horse Guards Parade?" The leader of the police dogs said, "They don't need looking after. Today no dog wants to eat, drink or even sleep. All they need is a place to sit, and there's no more sitting room in Downing Street. On your way, boys." Half the police dogs cleared away to Horse Guards Parade, and then the leader said, "Make way for the Dalmatians." Dogs fell back without resentment. Indeed, they were all wagging their tails and there were cries of "Long live Madame Cadpig," and all her Dalmatian relations. Mrs. said, "I hope I'm not looking smug, Pongo. I hadn't realized how important our daughter has become." And so the Dalmatian army entered Downing Street.